Maruti Suzuki has held on to the tag of being India's largest car maker for years now. Not an easy task when one looks at competition, but it also comes with its own share of challenges, like when sales slow down, as is the case right now. The auto industry seems to be stuck in a rut, with sales falling with each passing month. Maruti has chosen to observe no production days in order to manage inventory. That triggers a chain reaction with suppliers getting impacted too. Joining us now to talk about the possible remedies is R.C. Bhargava, the chairman of Maruti Suzuki. Mr. Bhargava, thanks very much for taking out the time and joining in. The chatter on the street is that the auto industry is in dire need of some supportive intervention to come in from the government. Is that something that, people like you are really hoping for to come about anytime soon?
Well, we are all hoping that with the good rains, the coming festive season, and some support both from the central and the state governments will take this industry out of the deep recession in which it has fallen in the last few months. And I'm hopeful that by the third or fourth quarter of this year, we will see a revival in terms of growth happening in the industry.
Mr. Bhargava, is this period any different from the slowdown that we witnessed in, say, 2008, 2009, or 2011, 2012, where the government, for one, came in and gave some temporary handouts in the terms of temporary excise duty cuts? They nudged the banks to promote retail lending in a big way. Do you feel that those sort of measures need to be taken now to make sure that it can at least be, a turnaround for the industry in whatever way possible?
See, the last two slowdowns which we had in 2008, 9, and then 13, 14 were normal business cycle slowdowns. This slowdown also started as a normal business cycle slowdown. It was no different. But then what happened was that substantial amounts of costs for buying a car were added on to the customer. That had not happened ever in the past. And when in the business cycle of a slowdown, you suddenly burden the customer with large amounts of extra cost and keep owning a car, then I think the situation becomes very different. This time it has happened for two major reasons. One which could not have been foreseen, which was the implementation of the various safety regulations which were notified several years ago and which came into force this year, like airbags, the ABS, the more stringent crash tests. These added substantially to cost to the customer this year. Again, state governments, 9 of them, in this last few months, including up till July, have been adding to the road tax for the customer, and that has run into several tens of thousands of rupees. So these extra costs have made the whole situation very different from the past.
So what could improve this? I mean, while we'd be hearing a lot about how the government needs to come in and, take GST cuts for it to spur some demand back into the system, do you think that is enough?
The state governments need to look at the timing of the road tax imposition. And I feel that it might be in the overall interests of the country, of the states, and of the industry if the recent impositions on road tax were rolled back and deferred for some time till the industry recovered. I think that's the most important thing which needs to be done. We all keep focusing on GST, but the impact of this road tax is something which we need to look at, because it is 2%, 3%, even up to 5% of the cost of a vehicle. Along with this, because of the cost of these new safety regulations and the cost of BS6 coming in this year, there is an substantial extra cost to the customer. And I think that is the main criteria for considering the reduction in the GST for a temporary period till the customer gets used to these increases over time.
Mr. Bhargava, good morning. Just wondering, as somebody, as a leader who's seen various business cycles and economic cycles as well, do you see how much of an impact of the economic slowdown do you see this to be? And even if there were some changes made or tinkering made to tax or otherwise, if indeed the economy is so slow and there are job losses or jobs not getting created, how will demand come back, sir?
No, I don't see that there's any serious problem with the economy or that there's a general slowdown of all sectors. I don't think that's true. I'm on the board of a FMCG company. The growth there was over 10%. And from what one is reading in the media, many sectors have grown quite well. Yes, the profit levels have come down, but that's largely because of higher interest costs. Interest costs actually should have come down, but for some reason they've gone up. So that's one factor. And the whole question of government taxation has to be viewed in the context of government revenues also. There are compulsions on the government to meet various expenditures. And if every sector wants a reduction in taxes, then I'm not sure how the government can ever balance its budget.
Glad you as an auto industry leader are saying that as well. It's not too often that we hear that, which is being very candid. The other small question, Mr. Bhargava, and I'm sure you've been asked this a number of times, but since we have you on this platform, we had a conversation with an auto magazine editor a few days back, and he pointed out to a couple of things which, according to him, he's not seen in the past, which might be impacting demand as well. One, he said he's at a loss to explain the behavior of millennials wherein they don't want to own assets, be it cars, be it houses, and that will, according to him, have an impact on demand. The other is the impact of shared mobility, which when the growth was there, helped demand for companies like you predominantly and Hyundai, but now that that market seems to be saturated, it is not creating that additional demand. Two very new factors, something that we can't relate to in the previous cycles.
The shared mobility factor is not a major issue. The number of cars which have been bought by the platform operators like Uber and Ola are not a very large number. The number of people using these is also not very large if you look at the total vehicle population. So while I think shared mobility is something which will keep growing, I don't think at this point of time it has had any significant impact on the slowdown of demand for the automobile industry. On the second question, I'm not quite sure if I understood what that question was, but I assume you meant that people are not wanting to own cars now. Is that it?
Yeah, the millennials at least.
Yeah, but I don't think that's also strictly true. I think the younger generation, the upwardly mobile people, they do want to have a car, but they want a cleaner car. They want a car with all kinds of connectivity so that they feel that they are in tune with the times today. And I think manufacturers are going in for that kind of car. And the success of the sales from the Nexa network, which we set up 3 or 4 years ago, shows how the new generation, the millennial people, are actually accepting that kind of showroom and the kind of services and the kind of vehicles which are being provided there. I don't think either of these are reasons, and it's not happening anywhere in the world. I don't think it's going to happen in India either. People will want to have personal mobility.
Okay, Mr. Bhargava, the one other factor, just wondering, everybody, including biscuit manufacturers and other FMCG companies too, are pinning hopes on a revival in this festive season. Do you foresee that? We were speaking to FADA yesterday and they said that the inquiries have gone up. Conversions haven't happened, but the inquiries in August are a lot higher than what they were earlier. Do you foresee that? And would that be a factor of discounts? Are discounts higher in Q2 compared to Q1? Can you give us some flavor of the current times?
I don't think the discounts are going to lead to sustained sales. Discounts can never lead to sustained sales because you can't sustain the discounts for long. But I do think that as the festival season is approaching, the rains have had a positive effect on the sentiments of people, especially in the rural areas. I think inquiries will increase, I think sales will increase, and especially if, as I said earlier, if some measures are taken both by the state and the central government to give give people the feeling that government is actually keen on pushing this sector and is giving some incentive. I must say at the same time, what has helped is, of course, the attitude of the government. They've responded quickly. The banking sector is becoming much more friendly in the sense of cutting down on customer things. You saw the state bank's decision to do on a case-to-case basis instead of a blanket restriction on all borrowing. The EV program has been slowed down according to another newspaper report. So all these, I think, will help sentiment change in the coming months.
Mr. Bhargava, I want to pick that point up when you're talking about the banking space and what they're doing. You don't feel that at the current point in time, dealer financing has taken a little bit of a hit, and because of GST, the working capital requirements of dealers has become a little tight. The economic slowdown has led to tighter lending from banks, which could also be a very big issue.
You know, dealer financing, we went into this in some detail. On a total macro level, the amount of finance available with the dealer is quite adequate. I'm talking of Maruti dealers. However, it's not evenly distributed between all the dealers. Also, we found that a small percentage of dealers, about 20% of them, had actually diverted money taken for car financing into other things. And that is where the banks got upset. And they put all these blanket restrictions on collateral and things. But thanks to the intervention by the finance minister and the finance ministry, I think banks are now adopting a case-by-case approach. And those dealers who have followed the regulations and the systems correctly all these years, who have a good record with the banks, they will not be subject to these collateral restrictions. This will only work where people have not done their business correctly. So I think this is a very positive change which is happening, and I hope this will go on. And with the companies, at least Maruti is at least following up with the dealers to see that the use of dealer finance is not diverted to any other use, and the work is done exactly as it should be done.
Okay, got that point. The other point that I want to touch base upon is what's been happening, to the backbone of, so-called push of the economic growth, which is rural India. Do you feel that the entry-level market, which is obviously a big opportunity size, is not well tapped in because of the rural distress?
You know, the rural market had been growing till a year ago. And this rural distress has been there for the last many decades. It's not something new that rural distress has come this year or last year. It's not true. Suicides in the rural areas, droughts in the rural areas, distress in the rural areas have been there for ever since I remember. But last year, in this last 12 months, the sales for the first time in rural areas also came down, and the negative growth was at the same level as the urban areas. I think this was because of the kind of problems we had last year, flooding in Kerala, drought in some other areas. But I think this year, with the rains having completely made up the earlier June deficit, I think the sentiment is changing. And I think this year again we will see a revival of rural demand. And I believe that in 2021 you will see again good growth of rural sales.
Mr. Bhargava, some Maruti specific questions. Does the slowdown impact dealership addition plans? Have we seen any kind of shutdowns? And part two of my question is on inventories. Most people that we speak to say that you are probably the best place on the inventory management front. What would be your comment be to that?
No, it's normal management practice not to carry more inventory than you need, or what is your normal inventory. Because carrying inventory not only adds to cost, but it ages the vehicles, and the customers don't like buying old vehicles. So as a matter of practice, right from the beginning, we have always said that production must follow the sales, and sales means retail sales, not wholesale sales, because we don't like also pushing vehicles to the dealer and making big stocks in the dealer, because that is as bad as keeping it, or maybe worse than keeping it in the factory. So we always try and adjust our production levels to follow what is happening in the retail market.
Okay, what about the dealership addition plans, sir? Have we seen major shutdowns at the Maruti levels as well, Maruti dealer levels as well?
The dealers have at the moment an inventory which, if it was normal sales, would be about a month's inventory, which is the norm. But because sales have come down, that inventory had reached up to about 40 days, which is a little excessive according to our standards. But I think now with the festival season coming and our cutting down production and dispatches to dealers, this inventory will come down to the level required.
Mr. Bhargava, one final question from mine at least. The slowdown, is it impacting the dealership addition plans of Maruti Suzuki?
No, we are continuing with our plan for expanding dealerships, both the Nexus conversion to the Arena and opening new outlets in the rural areas. All these plans continue exactly as they were prepared earlier. There's been no slowdown, no cutback in any of this, because our very firm belief is that this downturn is very temporary. It's not going to be forever. And if we once slow down the tempo of creating new dealerships and increasing the sales and service network, it'll be very hard to get that back again. So we will continue to do what we are doing in terms of strengthening our sales and service network.
All right. Mr. Bhargava, last question from my end, actually a two-part question. When we had a conversation with you, I think, 2 months ago, you said August would be a turnaround period for yourself. Do you stick by that? We're already in the midst of August. Or if not, then what do you push the turnaround target to? And the second part of my question is with regards to new launches and new models that you believe, that one company like yourself should look at in order to make sure that the market size keeps expanding. Because currently it seems more like new models, new launches, instead of expanding the market, are cannibalizing on the existing market.
The forecast about the August turnaround has obviously gone wrong. But at that time, I must confess, I had no idea that the state governments will be creating this extra burden on the customer. 9 states have done it, in some major states, by adding to road tax. And this makes the task of forecasting the future much more difficult, because if the states keep looking at the car industry, or the whole auto industry, in fact, as an industry where they can keep periodically increasing taxes and taking more and more out of this industry, I think this industry's future is always going to be a question mark to some extent. Because if the auto industry has to grow, cars have to remain affordable. And without the auto industry growing, the manufacturing industry is not going to grow fast enough. Jobs are not going to be created as fast as they should. So I think state governments need to relook and rethink about this policy of taxing anything relating to cars as if it's a luxury good which can bear any amount of taxation. And without that happening, I don't think this forecasts of future growth and all that can be made with any certainty. Your second question was relating to the, I missed that.
Product launches. New models. Cannibalize, instead of expanding the market, there are new models and
new
launches.
Model. New model launches this year, that will continue exactly as planned, because the time taken to prepare for new models, to develop these new models, and this time the new models include the BS6 models also. So the BS6 models as well as new model launches which were prepared, the time schedule was fixed maybe 3 years earlier that this is the time it would take. So that has to continue. There's no point in changing that at all, and that will continue. We have 6 or 7 BS6 models already in the market. The XL6 is, I think, due to be launched in the next couple of days or something.
Okay. Well, we wish you all the best for all of that and more, Mr. Bhargava. Thank you so much, and hopefully the economy doesn't prove to be a deterrent for the auto and the other industries. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Well, that's Maruti Suzuki in conversation with Bloomberg Quint. We wrap it up on this leg of Indian Open. From Devi and me and the team that put this show together, thanks so much for watching.